Hello, and thank you for joining us today. Welcome to today's webinar, Revitalizing Your Prospecting Strategy. My name is Pearl Hoagland, and I'm the Senior Program Manager for the Sanford Institute of Philanthropy. Before we get started, a couple notes. This webinar will be conversational, with the opportunity to ask questions during the webinar, as well as a Q&A following the presentation. Please submit any questions you have in the questions box using your GoToWebinar control panel. In the days following the webinar, you will receive an email with the slide deck and recording to review again on your own time. At the Sanford Institute of Philanthropy, we enhance fundraisers' skills so they can develop and sustain donor relationships to advance their cause in today's growing giving landscape through a proven contemporary curriculum presented by world-class nonprofit leaders, best-in-class faculty, and renowned philanthropists. We want to recognize our important affiliate partners who provide training and education to fundraisers nationally. Take a look at the map to find an institute in your community. If you're on social media, please give us a shout out using the hashtag #SIPWebinar and tag us. Now, I am pleased to introduce today's presenter, Tamika Franklin. As Director of Development for the Preuss School, UC San Diego, Tamika leads fundraising efforts, alumni engagement, marketing, and volunteer management. Previously, she served as Director of Development for Physical Sciences at UC San Diego, focused on major gift strategy, and as the division's Alumni Relations Director, where she developed a comprehensive engagement program. Tamika also played a leading role in developing UC San Diego's Black Alumni Council and Asian Pacific Islander Alumni Council, serving as an advisor to cultivate active participation among diverse alumni. For her efforts in promoting diversity and inclusion, Tamika was a recipient of the UC San Diego Diversity Award in 2014. Prior to joining UC San Diego, Tamika supported the Vice President's Office for University Relations and Development at San Diego State University. She is a graduate of Lawrence University with bachelor's degrees in government and philosophy. She's a board member of Lawrence University's Board of Trustees, Blind Spot Collective, and the Association of Fundraising Professionals San Diego chapter, where she serves as Vice President of Communications. Welcome, Tamika, and thank you for being here. Tamika, it looks like you might be muted. There we go.
Perfect. Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Pearl. And thank you for everyone who joined us today. Excited to share best practices and re-engage with prospect strategy, which is a core part of all of our worlds, especially in light of what's going on in our world today. Just before we get started, we'd love to do a quick poll. We're going to do two, actually. Just how many people have been involved in fundraising? How long you've been involved in fundraising?
A poll will launch on your screen in just a moment. We'll give about 10 seconds for you to put in your result. All right, 2 more seconds and then let's take a look at the results. Let's see what we have here. Tamika, can you see the results on your screen?
No, I can't, unfortunately.
All right, so we have less than a year, 9%. The majority are 10+ years. Close behind, we have 1 to 5 years, then 5 to 10 years. So pretty much even, 32% 10+ years, and then 28% 1 to 5 years, 27% 5 to 10.
Gotcha. All right, great. Thank you, Pearl. And then let's do the second poll. What's your current role in your organization?
All right, and again, we'll give about 10 seconds. Put in your answer. All right, let's take a look. So Tamika, 67% say fundraiser. Then next, we have about 23% in administrative role, and 4% prospect research.
Okay, all right, so pretty good across the board, skewing heavily fundraisers. So I will kind of focus on the frontline side of things, and that's really more where my expertise lies, but I would be happy to try and troubleshoot or think through other ideas as well as we move forward. So looking forward to your questions and having a robust conversation as we move forward. Great, so thank you for sharing that information. So we're here to talk about prospecting and how we can find qualified donors. And as we, this is a really core part of our jobs. To move people from, through donors, through volunteers, prospecting is a really big piece of how we decide, qualify or disqualify folks who are who are the right fit for our organizations. What exactly is prospecting? Well, it is the 8th step. It is part of it's phase 1 of the 8-step cost cycle, and it definitely is the process of searching for, or prospective donors. So these are the folks who, this is the actual process that we go through. And I'm sorry, lost myself a little bit. Okay, so this is the process that we go through. That's great that we have a process, but what exactly is a prospect? A prospect is an individual or organization that could potentially support your cause, could be advocating on your behalf, opening doors. They could be providing resources and skills, including philanthropy or volunteering. Basically, any entity can be a prospect. And I think it's really important, especially now that we approach things as such, whatever our typical markers are for wealth indicators per se, we're not in a space where we can go out and meet people in person, observe their environment, see how they're interacting. We're really kind of stuck within this box, within a computer screen, if you're lucky enough to get a video conference call with somebody that you're trying to engage. So you're going to have to think outside the box in terms of approaching prospects, who they will be. And that, I think, means we need to open that up a little bit more. Anybody that we're talking to could potentially be a prospect for our organization. So how do we identify them? Well, we'll get to that, but I want to make sure that we highlight, what our objectives are for today. We're going to learn how to data mine existing resources and database by identifying and qualifying prospects. We're going to discover how to thoughtfully leverage referrals and centers of influence to open new doors to prospects. And then we're going to practice qualifying prospects using the MADDEN system, which is a proven track of prospecting qualifying process. Great. Having issues advancing the site. Here we go. So qualified prospect. A qualified prospect is someone who, did I miss a slide? I'm sorry.
I don't believe so.
Oh, okay, I'm missing something. Okay, so a qualified prospect is someone who has the means to give, the ability to make a giving decision, their interest in your organization's mission. Somehow they've demonstrated that to us. And an existing relationship with the organization, volunteers, or leadership that provides assets or requests for support. Now, it can be all of these, it could be some of these, but I think these are really good markers that we can use to identify somebody who's ready to move forward to that next step. And the MADDEN test is a really great way for us to highlight what markers we're looking for. Some of these are self-explanatory, some of these might be new for you. MADDEN is our acronym for money. What's the capacity to be philanthropic? Approachable, can you secure the appointment? Desire, is there interest demonstrated in your organization or philanthropy in general? Decision maker, this authority to make a decision either on behalf of an organization or on behalf of themselves, their families. Emotion, how are they responding to your cause? Or, has that pivot from you or I to we happened? And a need, what is their driving passion and give, and are you aligning with that? So I know we have a handout here that runs through these in a little more detail. I do think it's a really good cheat sheet as you're thinking through prospecting. Have you qualified this person appropriately? Are these things that you can observe, do research on, and are you able to, by those markers, identify that this is a really good person to continue engaging either at a higher level or a lower level? So in terms of our prospecting, we're gonna talk about these. These are the different types of prospecting that you can have. I think, depending on the organization, some of these will hit very nicely, some of those will not. For me personally, I do a lot of the referrals, in circles of influence. Our social media marketing is something that we're still working through. So there's always room for improvement in terms of, having a philanthropic scope on how you can utilize some of these tools. But that's something that I'm personally working on as well in the larger organization that is UC San Diego. For our purposes today, we're going to focus on these: referral circle of influence and donor database. So for a referral, this is anybody that has been sent to your organization as someone that you might want to have deeper engagement with. So think a board member, a friend, salon event if you have one, and they brought in people that you've never met before. Those are all referrals. Those are people who could potentially be engaged with your organization, maybe know a little bit about it, haven't given, or they've volunteered a little bit, but they understand who you are and you want to be able, you have something to start from. It's a very warm way to prospect, and I highly recommend looking at that as an opportunity. If you have board members, for example, who are looking for something to do at this time, this is a really great way to utilize them, engage them in talking through, their spheres of influence, maybe their organizations that they work for, foundation boards that they sit on. These are people who can really open some doors so that you can get a little bit ahead of that line instead of doing the cold call. A good way to do this, if you're activating your board, for example, you really want to focus on those centers of influence. These are people who feel good about you, they feel good about the cause, and they have a network of connections who will be valuable to your cause. We have a handout as well that talks through what some of those people could be. Think your business leaders in the city. Think, people who sit on a ton of boards around town, really involved in some of the larger philanthropic organizations. They do galas, they do charities. They're usually the ones that are the hosting the honorary committee. Those are really good people with large centers of influence, also have capacity. And what you are hoping to do is connect people who have an interest in your organization and can branch that out and really be advocates out in the community and continue to bring people back. So that handout, I think, will be a really good one to reference. And I think the way it's set up is, just think through who do you know right now fit into that category that you can call up right now to say, hey, we could really use some help in filling your initiative. And hopefully they'll be able to open some doors for you there. Great. So we're going to talk about finding prospects in your database, which I think is probably one of the easiest things you can do right now. And I should preface this by saying I'm working under the assumption that you do have a database, and if you don't have one, please get one as soon as possible. Anybody who, if you do events, they come to that, they buy tickets. Anybody who has volunteered, some way that you can track the community members or alumni or whatever your prospecting base is, your pool is, you have to be able to track those actions so you know who's doing what, where, and how. I think most larger organizations have a really good system set up in place. If you are on the smaller end of nonprofit, then I think this is something that you really want to invest in. It will reap dividends in the future. So if you have an established prospect base, then I think this is a great place where you can really talk through, look through and see, are there low-hanging fruit? Are there people who have been sitting here for a while that have touched in, but they haven't really gotten involved? And I would split those up into A and then B and C prospects. A prospects are renewing donors who've given for 3+ years in a row with no increase. So they're steady, they're there, that money's coming in regardless. Maybe there's a little extra touch that you can do to get them inspired to give a little bit more, or to be engaged a bit more with their time. These are reactivated donors as well, people who dropped off for a little while, they've come back into the fold. That to me is a really good indicator of somebody who wants to be involved. And when you're giving your resources, that is a great great indicator that you should follow up with that person. A quick phone call just to find out why. We lost you along the way somewhere, and it's okay to acknowledge that, we lost you along the way somewhere and you came back and we're so grateful. Do you mind me asking why? And I think sometimes that opens up a deeper conversation about philanthropy, about the organization, about how it fits into the city that we're working with, the community that we serve. You may even think about ways that you can start talking about your organization in a different way. So that's a great way to start that conversation and to reactivate those donors in a larger, deeper, meaningful relationship. New donors, $500 or plus or more. This gift comes out of the blue. You have no idea why. That's also a great reason to call. And I think stewardship calls in that case to say thank you. We're so grateful for your generosity. We'd love to learn a little bit more about, how you found us and why you're here. If those names pop up quite often, it could be from a referral. Sometimes when donors to our organizations refer other friends, the easiest thing for them to do is say make a gift. They really need the funding to respond to whatever the case may be. And that might be the gift, that may be where it comes from. Hopefully you get a heads up, but if not, then this is something that you do want to make sure that you follow up on personally so that you can make a deeper, meaningful relationship with that person, engage them the way they'd like to be engaged. And I think that will help build out that pipeline as well. So these are as warm as it can get. I'm sure that we can think of other ideas, for, a prospect A that would fit into this A group. I would put referrals in here as well. I think those are people who may be in your database as well, but you don't know, you're not as familiar with them. They may have come to one thing. Anybody who's come to a fundraising event, things like that. You really want to look for people who've opted into something. That is a very clear indicator that they want to be engaged a little bit more, and it's our jobs now to dig a little bit deeper. For our B and C prospects, these are people that are, it's a little bit colder, and this is going to include a lot more options. So you can slice and dice this in a lot of different ways, but these are people who have maybe touched in once and we really don't know much about them. It might be more of a transactional conversation as opposed to we understand what your mission is, we understand what your purpose is, we want to be behind that. These are people who really don't know that much about us, and so you're going to be qualifying them pretty, from the start. You can do a zip code sort depending on where your organization is. See where you're getting big collections of people. If you're noticing a lot of people are in East County, you're tapping into your work, but you serve South Bay, that might be something to look into. Frequent ticket buyers, they love your work, they're showing up, they absolutely appreciate what you bring to the community. That's somebody you want to talk to. High bidders, but not necessarily winners. So if you do a lot of auctions, for example, and they're constantly, they're listing themselves 4, 5, 6, 7 times, they just didn't win something. That to me is an indicator that there's capacity there. You don't usually put your name down if you're not willing to pay for something. So that's a good wealth indicator. You may want to follow up on that, maybe do a little bit more research if you have access to prospect research. See if they're giving to other organizations around that are similar to yours, if they're philanthropic at all, or if they are connected to people who are philanthropic at all. And then start from there. And then anyone who's opted to make a donation from your website. And I say website specifically because it is the easiest entry point for anyone to make a gift. It takes effort for someone to pick up the phone and call an organization to try and make a gift over the phone. A website is, that's the easiest way for you to get income coming in the door. So if someone has decided, I'm looking at these kinds of organizations, this initiative, I think Black Lives Matter, for example, is a really good example. There's a flood of gifts that are coming in now because of a lot of the conversations that are happening in the world. A lot of those gifts are just happening online. People are putting in $10, $20, $30. I think it's still worth a follow-up, at the very least a thank you email. And then maybe in a month or so, if you can do a little bit more research, find out if this is somebody on the annual giving side. Yes, you definitely want to make a phone call. But if you're thinking major gifts, then yeah, do a little bit of research, see if you can find out some information about this person, and then follow up and see if there's a there. I think that's a really good way to manage to use people who are stepping up. So all of these people are in your database already, and they are people who, have some connection, some tie. They're not super cold. I think, today's world, we're really looking for people, we look for our champions, our big, bright people who have always been there for us. And I think now we really kind of have to think a little bit more strategically about organizations or community members who've been there for us, but we really haven't given them the time that we need to. We hopefully have more time to sit in and really think about that. And I think your database is a great place to mine before you even have to look externally for new prospects. So in summary, you definitely want to make sure you're qualifying leads to determine their desire, their capacity, and propensity to give. You want to use the MADDEN test to move your prospects from leads to Class A status. I think that's really important, that you're qualifying people appropriately so that you are using your time efficiently. You want to leverage referrals and centers of influence as well. Two of the most effective prospecting pools, methods to build your prospect pipeline, and really lean on people who are your champions, who are your advocates, who are the leaders there, who can really galvanize and bring people together. This is not work that you have to do alone. And anybody who's working with a board or a committee, you have a group of volunteers who are committed to making this organization the best possible. Lean into that as much as possible. And then use a CRM system to keep track of prospects, donors, campaigns, and more. Again, if you're starting out at the beginning and you have a couple, an Excel sheet, or you're using Access, it's a good start, but at some point you're going to want to graduate to something that is more robust, that can really track transactions, can track moves management, can track campaigns that are happening across different organizations or across different entities. If you're doing different initiatives, running them concurrently, for example, those are things that you want to be able to look back and check, not only so that you're sharing information internally with your team, but that you can look back and see what those trends are. You can see what works, what didn't work, make tweaks based on data, actual data. So the next time you launch it, it is as strong and robust as it can be. So that's an update on revitalizing your prospect strategies. I'm going to check in, see if we have any questions that have come in so far.
We do have some questions. We thought it would be great if we could walk through the MADDEN handout so that everyone could take a look. And Tamika, Christine has it ready to share on her screen.
Okay,
so
great.
If you could pop that up, we can walk participants through the handout.
All right, so I'm going to stop mine. There we go. I'm not seeing it yet. Just give me a second. There we go.
There we go. So we've pulled up both the MADDEN, the prospect qualification worksheet, and then the centers of influence. Tamika, which one would you like to start with?
Let's go with MADDEN.
All right.
Let's start with MADDEN. So as you can see here, so this is I would say start with your top 10, top 20 prospects. You can fill them out on the side. And this is a really good way to build out your strategy. So if, let's say prospect number one, we know has a capacity for wealth, is a decision maker in making sure, for philanthropy, and has expressed motion before, not necessarily for your organization, but for organizations of that kind. You would circle those. So would be, so you do that. And then classify them depending on where you see them fitting in that prospect pool. I think right now that would be an A. If you have a referral source from that, you place that in, and then strategy for securing information, which I think needs to be a little bit larger, but you want to, I would say, use this as a first step. This is not going to be your full strategy from start to finish. This is going to be your first step to start qualification if you haven't done that already, or cultivation. How are you going to actually engage them with the organization in a strategic way to arrive at that inevitable gift that you'd like to see? So whatever your first step is, based on all of your information here, that's what you would put into this place. For this individual that I've just hypothetically put together, my first step would be a phone call from the referral source. And I would ask them to see if we could do a joint meeting, or if they, actually I'd pick their brain a little bit, the referral source. I'd like to find out, how they want to be engaged, what they know of them so far, how much they're approached by different organizations, what has worked and what hasn't. And if I can work with that problem referral source to secure a meeting together so that I am introduced a little more warmly than going by myself, I think that's always a good strategy forward. So that's how I would use this tool. Did anyone have any questions about that?
I don't see any coming in yet specifically about MADDEN. And this is a great point, Tamika, that you made, that this MADDEN document is really supposed to be a tool, as you said, for each fundraiser, and how it best serves them. So an alternate, oh, it looks like someone did ask, what do we put in the classification section? And that's a great point, a great question. What I wanted to add is, as Tamika mentioned, you circle each of the MADDEN qualifiers that each prospect it has. So if they have money, right, the money that you're looking for, you would circle that. If they are approachable, you're able to get an appointment. And then if you look at the bottom of the handout under the key, you'll see class A, B, C. What you'll then want to do is add up the MADDEN qualifiers, and that's your classification. So if they have all, for example, all 6, they're absolutely a class A. Mm-hmm. If they have 3 to 4, B, but again, as Tamika said, that may be different for your organization depending on how your organization qualifies prospects. So absolutely use this as it relates to your organization.
Exactly. Thank you.
Of course, another question that just came up was to distinguish again between emotion and need.
That's a good question. So emotion is how they're responding to you specifically in the way that we're using it. So have you laid out a case and they're responding to you? What's their emotional stake in the ground for you? Versus need is what's driving their passion to give in general, and is that aligning with you or aligning with other organizations a little bit better? So it does blend into itself a little bit, but emotion really is speaking to how they're responding to you. Like, are they leaning into what you're talking about? Are they, have they made a test gift? Have they started, when you go to events, have they started talking about we are trying to move this forward, we are trying to cure whatever? That's a really good emotional piece, stake that someone has placed in your organization. They're invested in you and they want you to be successful. But a need is really more personal. I think you will find that out pretty early if you prospect appropriately. What's their passion for philanthropy? And I usually ask that question. How do you feel about philanthropy? What drives you? What's your passion? And that's where that need comes from.
Perfect. No more questions have come in about MADDEN specifically. And a reminder to everyone on the webinar that you can download this handout and the other handout that we're about to go through on your GoToWebinar control panel. Additionally, when we send out the slide deck and recording, we will also include the handouts in that email as well.
Great. All right. Do we want to look at the second? Okay. Great. So this is going to be more, who do we know or who do we have in the city that we want to engage with? Ideally, you'd be able to fill this out with folks that you have some kind of connection to. And, I would expand that out to 6 degrees of separation. If you have someone who's on your board, or is a major donor that has a broad broad network that you can tap into, that's a win. Think of this more as, if you've ever done a campaign before and you're doing peer screening, this is akin to that. You can sit with one of your donors or with your board members. I would say this should be individual conversations. This is definitely not a group activity, but sit with those really core volunteers and talk them through what what you're doing, what the initiative is going to be, how you'd like to get them engaged as leaders, and then really kind of go through, who can we engage in this effort? Who would be willing to join us? Who do you know that would be willing to talk to us about that? And that's how you fill this out. You're not going to fill this out with, you can do this a couple of different ways. If you're doing it with the board process that I've explained, the outline there, then you're not going to fill every single bucket here, and you're not going to have every single line filled. You may have a few. There's some people who are really in socialite circles and they can give you a laundry list of people that would fit there, but they may not have real estate connections, for example. So this is just an idea of where we typically have spheres of influence with capacity to give, people who are usually trying to be outward facing in the community, who like to attach themselves to organizations that are doing good work, want to be involved at a really high level. This is where that is what this could be used for. So do we have any questions about this specifically?
Yes, we do. And you touched on one of them. This question came in before, but I still wanted to ask it in case you wanted to dive in a little more. Sure. Earlier in the presentation, someone asked, would you walk through the circles of influence worksheet with board members? Could you dive in a little bit more about how you would approach this?
Yeah, so I would actually, so this is something I would probably announce at a board meeting, because I want to make sure that they're all aware that we're going through this exercise. And I want them to be bought into this discussion as well. So it would be a topic on a board meeting agenda where we can sit and talk through why it's important to have their guidance in building out a robust pipeline for filling your blank initiative. We would, maybe spend some time there with, I'd prep my leadership, of course, but we'd spend some time answering questions, making sure people feel comfortable doing that. And if you have the time, or you have a large enough board and you need to actually segment it down, you can have people self-identify in a couple of different categories. The ones I've typically seen are influencers, people who, or door openers, people who are willing to open up their networks and just introduce people. Philanthropists, people who are going to write a check, feel very comfortable in that space, and in some cases will actually do the ask on behalf of the organization. Or advocates, people who are willing to broadcast widely how great your organization is, the great work you're doing. These are people with national platforms, really high social media following, or media personalities, or anybody who really feels like this is what I want to, this is why I'm best supported. I can give you I can amplify your message, and hopefully through that we will encourage people to come back and give. So if you are able to identify where those three are, then it's easier then to say, okay, we're going to focus on this section of the board. We're going to ask them questions. We're going to ask them to fill this out for us, work with us, and then we're going to develop strategies with each of those. If you have a large board, I think that's a really good way to go about it, because not everyone's going to feel comfortable doing that. You can start with that first group, and then the second group of advocates or philanthropists, you can kind of work through those. If you don't have a large board, then I would say this is a activity for everyone. The board I currently work with right now has 15 members. So I would approach every single one of them. I would set a time to sit down and talk. I would ask for a significant amount of time. I'd ask for about an hour, hour and a half or so, if at all possible. When we were able to go outside, I would open it up. I would say, let's just do lunch. Just sit down and make it a working lunch and go back and forth and figure this out. The time usually goes a little bit faster when you have something else to do. And I would come in prepared, I would do a little bit of research. I know what the spheres of influence are for my board members. So I'd come in with like a short list of folks that, just to seed some things so that I can kind of generate some conversation. Again, not expecting all of these pieces to fill out, but you'd like to come away with at least 5 really solid names of individual donors or organizations that are, that you can do some research on, that you can approach, and then you can follow up with figuring out the strategy and going from there. So this is step 1 in what would be a multi-step process. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, they actually responded that it did, which is great. I did receive another question. You mentioned additional potential circles of influence. Would you share a few examples of some that perhaps are not on the sheet, but that you might add to your own circles of influence sheet at your organization, or that they may explore with their organizations?
Sure. So I think it's just going to be very specific to your organization, what you're looking for. At the Preuss School, we're a charter school in San Diego. One of my circles of influence would be education. Looking for educational practitioners who understand not only the district, but understand a charter school system, understand magnet school systems, understand charter networks, public-private charters. You're looking for people who really have a deep knowledge of how those are administratively run and how curriculum drives them. but that is a very specific need for my school, for this organization that I work for. In some cases, yeah, I would probably take out tech and biotech and put that there for us specifically. But when I worked with physical science, for example, tech, biotech, that's a big one. The one that would probably take off is marketing. You know, that's not something that we probably would have a ton of. There may be a few. So this is something that, you know, this is just an idea of what it could look like. It's not, it doesn't have to exactly look like this. Socialites and dinner party people, some people may say, you know what, those are kind of one in the same. Let's merge that, let's put those together. Maybe we need to add in the arts. There, you know, that would be, you know, and if you work with the opera, you work with modern arts, fine arts, museum, that would be a piece. You know, who are the big collectors in San Diego that you need to be aware of? Who, you know, those are the folks that you're looking for. So this is not a one size fit all handout. It is a start. I would advise everyone to kind of take a look at this, really align it with your organization. What are the, when you talk about expertise, what are the things in the room that you absolutely need? And then what are the things that you know because of a title or because of the industry means that they're going to come with some wealth capacity to give? That would be a good way to kind of adjust this. I'd also say that no document like this, if it's a strategy document, it's a working document. So revisit it. If you started and 6 months later you realize, you know what, this is just not netting where you need to go, do it again. Update it and see if you need to change some of the categories. Engage your leadership in it. This is a really good way for them to start thinking through who are their spheres of influence that they're not bringing in to the organization at all because they're just not thinking about that. So sit with your executive director or your president or your chairs and have them work on this with you so that all of you know that you're working on the same goals, you're working in the same direction in service to the organization and the mission.
Wonderful. One question did come in about the circles of influence and specifically engaging your board. The question was, you mentioned that you'd reach out to those board members. Can you share some, whether it's talking points or how you might approach that conversation when you're requesting a meeting?
Sure. Like I said, if you can mention it at a board meeting just so everybody hears it together, I think that's always good. Also, I like to document things, so it means it's in the board minutes. So I can reference the board minutes when I say, hey, remember we were talking about this? We really would love your help in that. But if you are in a space where you don't have a regular board meetings, or if you have some space between board meetings and this has popped up, I think utilizing your, you know, if you have a leadership structure, using the chair, the president, the executive committee, bouncing the idea off them first, because you do want to have buy-in with somebody on that board. It can't always be driven top down. It needs to be driven across colleagues. And the executive board committee would be a good place to start. So I would try to have a conversation with them, you know, put up a conference, video conference, and just explain what you're trying to do and see if this actually makes sense. If, you know, you can go back and forth a bit and adjust things. But you want to at least walk away from that meeting feeling like you have the support of the board leadership. So when this is presented to other people, you have the board members are willing to kind of hold other members accountable. Utilize as many areas as possible, I think, in situations like this. And then the initial email will really be, you know, we've been thinking about, you know, what's next for this organization. And we need to, we realize that one of the things we want to improve is our fundraising. We need to fill in your blank here, build out the pipeline, raise more funds for whatever initiative, increase the supports that we provide to the community. And we need your help. Would you be willing to give us at least a 30-minute conversation to start this, and then we can see if we need more time. And usually if you have somebody who's on your board, you know, that is to me the biggest mark of bought-inness, for lack of a better word, that I can think of. Time is a finite resource. People can write checks, they can make more money. You have a finite amount of time. And so if someone is saying, I've seen what you do, I want to join your board if you'll have me, and I will be here for X amount of time, whatever your terms are. To me, that means that's somebody who that is as warm as it gets. So call them on that. You know, I think it's rare that you get a no, and if you get a no, there's probably some other issue there that you need to address, and you should be aware of what that is. But it really should start with, I would start it with leadership on the board and then branch it out from there. The one thing I say to this is, we're asking people to open up their networks and to talk to us about, who they're comfortable reaching out to. And it's essentially like opening your address book and handing over a sheet of paper with some contacts. And that can be very personal. So I want people to feel that, I'm not taking advantage of them and that I'm respecting their privacy. If they want to be in a space where, if some people just react a little bit better individually, it is a good idea to give folks a space where they can say no to you without the peer pressure of the group around. This conversation will look different for everyone. So I want to make sure people are as comfortable as possible. So that's why I would advocate for individual meetings.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Again, both of these handouts are available to download right now on your GoToWebinar control panel and will be provided in the follow-up email. And again, they are tools for you at your organizations to take back to your teams to look through and get this process started, and to explore, for example, which categories are relevant to your organization, what's missing that for your specific organization you need to add. So we are now going to transition into our Q&A. I've been writing down we've actually received a number of questions, so we're going to try to get through as many as we can. I'm just going to get started. Someone asked, and I believe they were referring to the MADDEN worksheet, if you can give more examples of strategies for securing information on prospects.
So the actual research side, how do you do that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's where I'm a little bit out of my depth. That is very much a prospect research function. And I've always worked in larger institutions where I've had a prospect researching team that I can rely on. So I personally could not tell you how they go about looking for wealth indicators, organizational support, that kind of thing. But we did, when I was starting out in philanthropy, we did talk about, kind of Google 101. Anything that is publicly available that you can kind of look through. And you just want you just want to do a general Google search on who this person is and see if there's if there are things that are popping up. LinkedIn, I found, is a very helpful step if anyone who has a job or is involved in a professional setting has a LinkedIn page. So I would start with that. Just take a look through that and see if you can find any information about them there. You'll usually then get some kind of throughway to the organization they work for, things that they're involved with, the schools they went to. I think that's a really good start. If you happen to have people with a little more of a public profile, and you'll likely be able to find another social media connection that they have, and that can give you some leads as well. But yeah, though it's a little difficult when, for me to answer that question from a prospect research perspective, because I guess I'm a little bit spoiled in that way. I can ask someone to do this for me and get a report back in 2 weeks. And I know that is a very fortunate position to be in. If you are working with alumni though, I think there are ways that you can leverage either Facebook contacts, or you can leverage Google contacts as well. There's usually some connection to a school that people will put out there. If you have the class year, that's a big help as well. But you have to have some information going in. So if you get this referral from someone and it's just a name, there's no title, there's no foundation connection, there's nothing, just the name, then it's going to be extremely difficult to do. So it is kind of on us to prod a little bit more, okay, this person is who, works where, does what, why do you think this would be a good connection? And I think you can be, softly but blunt about the fact that, you want to make sure that you're following up on leads that will support the organization, or can be, are worth your time. I think everyone understands with fundraising that we have goals and metrics, and if you have boards, you are accountable to that board for, to make sure that you are bringing in money that, the organization can use. So I think it's fair to say, we really do need a targeted list of people who we can move this forward. So as much information as you're willing to share, that'd be great. And if you're not willing to share it, but you're willing to make the introduction, then we can do the phone call, do the phone call or the meeting first. I can do that prospecting with them. And through those guiding questions that you typically use, you can then get more information to start the research.
Absolutely. And someone just made a comment too, that when using Google and LinkedIn, ensure that you have the right person, especially if it's a common name. That is definitely true. Some additional resources are some prospect research softwares like Wealth Engine, Donor Search, those different platforms too. But same thing, you always want to be sure you have the right person. And then going back to the MADDEN document as well, one of the, as Tamika mentioned earlier, it's also a helpful tool to get you started. So if you know that there is a gap in information that you need, the strategy for securing information could be reaching out to that referral source. Perhaps they know that information, or they might also be a good place to start to trigger, give you some information that will help you determine how to research that information. So yeah, as Tamika mentioned, it's not easy. There definitely is a lot of sleuthing and a lot of different platforms and resources that you can leverage to get that information.
Yep. I would really caution, if you get a referral, you know, do the deep dive, make sure that you're asking, if you're getting a referral, follow up with that person and, you know, and ask why, because it is important that you understand what they were thinking and that they understand what you're looking for. And sometimes you can talk past people. So, you know, just ask the second question. And, you know, it's always great that we get referrals and we love that, but ask the second question: why, how, when, and get them involved in this as much as you can, because they're, you know, whoever did the referral is going to open the door a little bit better than you can.
Yes, definitely. All right, our next question is there any advice for a fundraiser who has not been given a prospect list and who is pulling from different directions in the database?
So there is okay, that's a tough one. So you have a database. Is it a robust database? And by that, I guess this is going to be tough. If you can respond, I'd love to know how robust the database is and how many other fundraisers are working in that.
Just wrote back saying it's a huge CRM.
Okay. So
10 plus other fundraisers.
10 plus other fundraisers. Okay. So if it's a huge CRM and you have 10 fundraisers, depending on the levels, your prospect pool probably is between 50 to 200, depending on what your focus level is. If you are on the annual giving side, and you just need to play the numbers, I would take a look at any prospects who have made a gift but isn't managed, and just pull those in. If you don't have those, then start looking. If all of those are taken, then I would start looking at the wealth indicators. Hopefully your database has the capacity for that. See how they're rated. See if there is any information about volunteer or opportunities, any touch point with the organization. If you find something like that and opt in and no one's talking to them, that's someone you want to call. And that's how you build it up. It's going to be really grassroots, kind of working from the bottom to build out an organization, to build out a pipeline that will hopefully net you something. Now, I will caution that this is not a foolproof way to build a prospect portfolio. I'm a little concerned that you don't have anything to start, and I would hope that you're talking to your leadership so that you have very manageable expectations. No one can create miracles with zero. And they need to know that you're going to do your best, but you need to start with something tangible. So I would make sure that I have a very, very clear understanding of what the expectation is today, 30 days from now, 60 days from now, 90 days from now, a year from now, and then just pound the pavement. You're probably going to do a lot of cold calls, and I would say be gracious with yourself and pace yourself with that. But know that you're playing the numbers. You are throwing a lot out there to hopefully get back a fraction of it. And that's not you, that's just the numbers that you've been handed. But good luck in building that out. And I really do hope that there are, a few warm nuggets in there that can help build out a pipeline that will, it'll take some time. Don't mean to be negative on that, but I do want to be realistic.
So we have great questions coming through. The next one we have is, Is there anything we can do to identify and learn more about donors when we get a surprise anonymous donation through a donor advised fund?
Donor advised funds are tricky. If you have a donor advised fund, if it's coming through, like say San Diego Foundation, for example, they won't betray the privacy of the donor, but they will, they're willing to share a little bit. And so if you have a contact there, I think that would be a good start. Just, we got this gift. We just love to know, how they came on the radar and how you're advising them about our organization. And that will give you a little bit of insight. I don't think you can ask about the donor personally, but you can ask around that conversation. Hopefully the donor advised fund has a name on it. If not, it's going to be really difficult to steward. So that's going to take a little while too. I think you can call any organization to say, find out how does this person want to be recognized. Does that goes directly to the organization, the house organization that holds the DAF, or does it need to go to them directly? So you can do a little bit of fishing around with that. But I do know that some donor advised funds have names that have absolutely nothing to do with the person making the gift. So in those cases, I've rarely seen a donor advised fund come in that doesn't have information about the donor itself, like why this was chosen or how you can send information out. But if you don't have that, try to add something personal into the thank you that goes out. There's the gift receipt part of it, and that's great, but try to reach out to either the financial advisor that sent the information, or try to send a personal note that goes into whatever correspondence goes out. Make it handwritten, make it personal, and just throw it out there. You don't know if you may not get an answer back, but at least you're offering to be open to a phone call to talk a little bit more about what this organization is. Depending on the level, I would even open an opportunity for the person to meet with our executive director, 30-minute call, just so you can hear from leadership why the school performs the way it does and how philanthropic dollars push the mission forward even better. So those are kind of some strategies. But donor advised funds, I don't think anyone's cracked that one yet. They're just really, really tricky to maneuver. But you just kind of have to think outside the box and try your best to get in there, knowing that you're just throwing things into an ether. It may not come back to you, but it's worth the effort to try.
All right, our next question is, how is what is happening in our world today, or how does it affect talking to colder prospects?
Well, I think it is a little tricky because you want to meet people where they are. I'd say there's been a pivot earlier in March when everything started shutting down. The general idea was, let's just stay away, let's not call anybody, let's not talk about finances at this point, with warm and cold prospects, because everyone's hurting. You may be fiscally sound, but you're emotionally frustrated, and there is a lot going on that we're all processing. And by the way, we're processing that too. So let's just not have these conversations. Let's leave people where they are. And then around April, I noticed the pivot to, well, let's at least check in and see how people are doing. Let's do stewardship calls. Let's do thank you calls. Let's do check-ins. And so at UC San Diego, there was a combination of just, hi, how are you? How can we be relevant to you? What do you need at this time? And those would generate a lot of interesting, things. We talk about the health system. We talk about career readiness. We talk about kind of financial sustainability, education, how are students on campus doing, all of the things. And through that, we decided to do a giving day in May, and it was focused on 3 major areas on campus, best medical supports, general support for the campus, and a fund for students to apply to if they had hardships. And it was really well received. So I think we're now in a place where make the ask. We've kind of moved a little bit further. Make the ask and see if they say yes or no. Cold calls, I think, are always going to be difficult. They're difficult under the best of circumstances, but it's still worth trying to do them. I would probably skew less on doing those and more on the warmer ones. If you have warm phone calls to make, try to balance them balance them out as much as you can, because they will get draining after a while. So if you have 10 great phone calls and you can make, and you have 100 others that they're wild cards, break them up over time. Like, challenge yourself to do maybe 5 a day, and then step away from it. And then if you can do a little bit more, jump in again. But meet yourself where you are. Don't push too hard. That is cold prospects are people who are not necessarily involved with us yet, or have decided not to be involved for a reason. And we do want to respect that as much as possible.
All right, we have time for one last quick question. The question is, to what extent do you advocate using prospects to generate additional prospects?
Highly. It's a referral. You should definitely use what's at your disposal. And I think it's fair to ask that too. When I always ask, how do you see philanthropy in your life? What do you, and how does that work? And then I always ask, what are the things that you think you can bring to us? This is a relationship. It's a give and take. So it's not us giving donors things to feel great about. It's donors bringing stuff to us as well. It's time, talent, and treasure. And so at some point you can ask for as much as possible, and you can ask people to stand in front and yell and talk about us, but you also need to kind of open the door to bring more people in, and that's how you build the pipeline. I would say, see how the conversation is going before you ask that question. If you just made a connection and this person, you're everything's clicking, then yeah, ask them about, who else on your radar should we be talking to? I think that's fair. I found this actually works really well with businesses, organizations. Large organizations around town. If they're a large conglomerate and they have a lot of mini pieces in between, they can ask, they'd probably talk about that. Or if they're in an industry that likes to share, that's something that works really well too.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. A huge thank you to everyone for participating in the Q&A and for your great questions. I'm so sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but hopefully it was helpful to everybody. If you would like to contact Tamika, her information is here on the screen. Again, this slide deck will be provided in a follow-up email, so you'll get all of this information. Tamika, thank you so much again for taking the time today to come talk to us about how we can reactivate our prospecting strategies, especially during this time where we might have to shake things up a little bit. But thank you again for taking the time and being here today.
Okay, thank you all.
All right, so prospecting is just one of many topics that we focus on in our textbook called Selling the Sanford Way, A Guide to Relationship-Driven Fundraising. If you would like to download the first chapter for free, they'll let you go to causeselling.org. You can find our textbook in print, then hard copy or ebook on Amazon. And don't miss our next webinar on August 19th, Digital Strategies for Today's Fundraising Landscape with Francisco Martinez. You can register today. Thank you again to our audience for your time and participation. To help us continue to improve our monthly webinar series and ensure that we're continuing to provide value to you, we would love if you would take a few minutes to complete our survey, which will pop up as soon as the webinar completes. We hope that you are all safe and healthy, that you enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week, and we thank you for all that you do to better the communities in which we live, work, and play. Thanks again, and see you on August 19th.